Picture a man walking out of an Australian asylum in 1948 after 30 years locked inside. He had been in there since the First World War. Out of his mind, written off, gone. Then a doctor gave him a few drops of a dissolved metal, and within weeks he was sane enough to go home and back to work. It was the first time in history a drug had ever done that. 2 years later, the same drug killed him. And almost no one beyond that hospital ever learned his name. To see why that should be impossible, you have to know what an asylum was in 1948. It was not a hospital you got better in. It was where you were sent to disappear. If they put you in the chronic ward, the word on your file was incurable, and they meant it. There was no pill that reached the thing itself. They could lock you down. They could drug you into a stupor, or sink you in a cold bath. None of it touched the storm of mania at the center of the mind. So a man walking out sane after 30 years wasn't a recovery. It was something that did not happen. And the thing that did it wasn't some elegant molecule built in a great laboratory. It was a metal, lithium. The third element on the periodic table, the kind of stuff you dig out of dried lake beds and dirt. You would think a discovery like that lands like a bomb and changes everything overnight. It did the opposite. It disappeared for 20 years. Why? Sit with that question, because the answer is uglier than it looks. The man who found it wasn't a famous scientist. His name was John Cade, and in 1948 he had just come home from the war. He'd spent 3.5 years in a Japanese prison camp watching strong men come apart inside their own heads with no way to help them. That stayed with him. When he got back to Australia, he took a job running a repatriation mental hospital outside Melbourne, a place full of soldiers who had never made it back to themselves. He wasn't chasing a Nobel Prize. He was trying to fix the exact suffering he'd been forced to watch. He had no research training and no real lab. He did his experiments in an old kitchen on the hospital grounds. And he had a theory. It was wrong, as it turned out. But it took him somewhere true. He thought mania was a poisoning. That a manic brain was being flooded by too much of some natural substance. To find the poison, he took urine from his manic patients and injected it into guinea pigs. The manic urine seemed to kill them quicker. He blamed uric acid. The problem was that uric acid won't dissolve in water, and he needed it dissolved to test it at all. So he grabbed a chemical to do the dissolving for him. A lithium salt. That's all the lithium was. A solvent. A helper doing a job that had nothing to do with the brain. And that is precisely where the accident walked in. He injected the guinea pigs with the lithium solution, and the wrong thing happened. The animals that should have been frantic or dead went quiet instead. Calm. Awake, but oddly at peace. So he took everything else away and gave them lithium on its own. Same result every time. Now, the heroic version of this story always skips the next part. Cade might have been looking at nothing more than poisoned animals slowing down. Lithium in high doses is toxic, and a sluggish guinea pig proves nothing on its own. He couldn't have known which one it was. He may have been right by being wrong, or wrong by being right. It doesn't really matter, because he went and tested it anyway. And the way he tested it tells you who he was. He didn't reach for a patient first. He swallowed the lithium himself for weeks to be sure it wouldn't kill someone. Only when he trusted it did he choose his first patient in March of 1948. His name was Bill Brand, 51 years old, a returned soldier from the First World War, trapped in mania for 30 years, since the year he signed up in 1916. He was one of the hopeless ones, the chronic ward, a man who was never getting out. Cade gave him lithium, and Bill Brand came back. The agitation drained away. The endless motion went still. Inside a few weeks, a man lost for 3 decades was calm and lucid, himself again. They sent him home. He went back to work, like the last 30 years had been a fever that finally broke. Cade tried it on 9 more manic patients and watched the same thing happen to all of them. In September of 1949, in 4 short pages in the Medical Journal of Australia, he wrote it down. But lithium has a second face. The dose that settles a mind sits terrifyingly close to the dose that poisons a body. And in 1948, nobody could measure how much lithium was in a person's blood, not even roughly. Every single dose was a guess. The danger never announced itself. To Bill Brand, lithium didn't feel like a tightrope. It felt like being well. So he did the most human thing there is. After months of feeling fine, he decided he didn't need it anymore, and he stopped. The mania came straight back. He was readmitted back inside the same storm that had already eaten 30 years of his life. Cade put him on lithium again, and again it pulled him out. But that line between the dose that healed him and the dose that harmed him was still invisible. Nobody could measure it. And in 1950, 2 years after a few drops of dissolved metal set him free, Bill Brand died of lithium poisoning. The first person a psychiatric drug ever brought back from madness was one of the first it killed. And as cruel as that sounds, this is just what the edge of medicine costs. The pioneers pay for it. So do the patients brave enough to trust them. The cure and the poison were the same thing, in amounts too close to tell apart. That isn't a scandal. That's the price of being first. Cade was shaken, and the timing around him could not have been worse. In America, lithium had been sold as a cheap salt substitute for heart patients. People took it freely, and some of them died. So in early 1949, American regulators banned it outright. Right as one doctor proved lithium could rescue a mind, everyone else was being taught to fear it as a poison. It got banned. Everyone got scared, and nobody went back for it. So who do you blame? Nobody, really. There's no single villain here. It's just how these things go in their moment. Fear shows up, and the door quietly closes. So lithium worked, sitting right there in print, and it got left to gather dust for 20 years. Not because the science was wrong, because of what lithium is. And the correction worth making is this. It wasn't medicine that turned its back on lithium. Doctors wanted it. But doctors don't manufacture drugs, companies do. And a company is a corporation. And a corporation doesn't move out of charity or kindness. It moves toward profit. Lithium is an element. You can't patent an element. Anyone can sell it, which means nobody can own it, which means there's no fortune hiding inside it. And a drug with no fortune inside it has nobody to push it. No company would pay for the big trials. No company would bother turning a cheap metal into a medicine for the mind. When America finally moved to approve it, it hit an absurd wall. No drug company was even willing to file the paperwork because there was no money in it. A group of doctors had to think about filing the application themselves just to make the cure legal. So why did it sit there for 20 years? You already know why. We like to say medicine takes whatever works. It doesn't. The companies that make our medicines take whatever sells. Lithium is the proof, because lithium is the cure no company could own. A year after Cade's paper, another drug arrived, chlorpromazine, a name you'll never remember, and history handed it the crown, the medicine that started modern psychiatry. Lithium got there first. The world just wasn't paying attention. America didn't approve it until 1970, the 50th country to do so, the last one in the room. And still, the thing they ignored refused to stay buried. A handful of stubborn doctors, most of them in Europe, kept testing it year after year until you couldn't argue with the evidence anymore. Notice who did that? Not the companies, the doctors, the ones actually thinking about the patient. Today, lithium is the gold standard for bipolar disorder. It's on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. And it is still the only psychiatric drug ever shown to do the one thing that matters most. It lowers the odds that a person takes their own life. Ask how it does that, and the honest answer is that nobody can tell you. We still don't know. And if you think this was only an old story, look at now. Companies buy up patents and lock them in a drawer, sometimes because there's no profit, sometimes to make sure nobody else builds the thing that would make their own product worthless. The people it leaves behind were never the point. So picture that man again, walking out of the asylum, sane after 30 years, because of a metal you could dig out of the ground. He was living proof that the impossible had already happened. The proof just sat there, ignored, because no company could own it. He got his whole life back. You never heard his name. There was never any money in remembering it.